Babe Ruth is one of the most recognizable names when it comes to baseball, and really sports in general. He's a baseball legend, someone who put up godlike numbers throughout the course of his entire career, is known to have cursed the Boston Red Sox out of a championship for over 8 decades because they traded him, and is still looked at as one of the best athletes of all time. There certainly came a lot of baggage with Babe Ruth, considering he caused some havoc. By the time he was 8 years old, Ruth had already chewed tobacco and drank whiskey. In his playing days, he got drunk before a lot of games, once punched an umpire during a game, and even had to sign a morals clause which said he couldn't drink any alcohol or go to bed past 1 a.m. during the season without the permission from his manager. As much of a mess as he could be, none of that compares to the crime that Ruth once allegedly committed. Before I get into this, I of course want to make sure everyone knows that I am not accusing Babe Ruth of anything. This is just a theory, and one that has the capability of it being true as much as it has for being false. In his first year with the Red Sox, Babe Ruth would eat at a coffee shop around the corner from his hotel fairly often. This coffee shop had a waitress, and that waitress's name was Helen Woodford. Just 3 months later, Babe, who was 19 years old, and Helen, who was 16 years old, well, they got married and bought an apartment together in Boston. Skip ahead to 1919, and the two would buy a 16-room house in Sudbury, Massachusetts. As far as the on-field matters went, well, Babe was doing his thing. In 1919, Babe hit .322 with an OPS over 1100. The next year, .376 with an OPS over 1300. The year after that, .378 with an OPS over 1300. From 1919 to 1922, he totaled 177 home runs. Babe Ruth was all around the best player in baseball, quickly becoming pretty much an American icon. 1923 came around, he hit .393 with a 1309 OPS, popping 41 home runs while taking home the American League MVP award. And that's when Babe met model and Broadway chorus line performer Claire Hodgson, someone who he started to visit frequently at her Manhattan apartment. Babe continued to rake on the field, hitting to an OPS over 1200 in 1924, 936 in 1925, over 1200 again in 1926, same for 1927, and then a season where he hit 54 home runs with a 1172 OPS in 1928. From 1924 through 1928, Babe Ruth tallied 232 home runs and just continued to be the cultural phenom that he was. 6 years later, in 1929, Babe's first wife Helen tragically died in a house fire that he didn't even live in or have any association to. So how could Babe Ruth have possibly been involved in this? Babe Ruth was incredibly remorseful, with the Boston Globe reporting that he had quote-unquote read him dies and a quivering chin, speaking in a trembly voice about the tragic death of his former wife. Here's a full quote from the Boston Globe on what Babe Ruth was like while talking to reporters about Helen's death. Quote, "His chest rose and fell. He gulped audibly and his eyes filled as he dabbed at them with his big hands. For fully 5 minutes, he struggled for control of his feelings and emotions." End quote. He also attended Helen's funeral service and burial, both things that Edward Kinder, the man that Helen was with at the time of her death, failed to attend. This makes it seem like he didn't do anything to kill her. But at the same time, the obvious thing to question is the sincerity, and the possibility of him acting to be as sad as he seemed. There is a big piece of context here that points to Ruth at least having some kind of motive that makes sense if he was indeed involved with the house fire. By 1929, Babe and Helen were no longer living with each other, although they were still allegedly married. Helen's sister Nora Woodford is the key to all this, because she was at a meeting that took place between Babe and Nora's sister Helen at Yankees headquarters. In the meeting, Babe asked Helen for a divorce so he could marry his new love Claire, and Helen agreed, but there was a catch. She wanted $100,000. According to Nora, Babe told Helen to go to hell and stormed out of the meeting. 1 month later, she was dead. Nora's daughter, Patricia Grace, was on record saying this, quote, "Aunt Helen was in fear for her life because Babe Ruth wanted a divorce because he was carrying on with women. Of course, we were a Catholic family and she would not divorce. He was trying to get rid of her. He had these hoodlums or what have you. Those are the stories my mother told me." End quote. Babe Ruth was and still is known today as someone who was one of baseball's best players, if not the best, while also having a very problematic persona. He was a womanizer, a big drinker, had anger issues, got reckless even in nights before games, and more. But if Babe had even an ounce of involvement with this house fire that ended the life of his first wife, Helen Woodford, that trumps it all. The fire was believed to be an accident, but as for Helen's family, They thought otherwise. Helen's brother, Thomas Woodford, and someone who was a former Boston policeman, made the claim that Helen was drugged with opium, with the house being deliberately set on fire. To this day, the true cause of the death of Babe Ruth's first wife, Helen Woodford, is a mystery. Maybe she really did die from an accidental fire, or perhaps Babe Ruth had something to do with it. We'll probably never know unless Babe Ruth's spirit starts talking, but it's interesting to think about nonetheless. It was ultimately determined as a complete accident, and nobody, including Babe Ruth, ever got in any sort of trouble because of her sudden death. Let me know if you think Babe Ruth had anything to do with the death of his first wife, and thank you for watching.